know about already, you should just have on your radar, and research them and see if there's a fit. Obviously, you know, we give out a lot of grants as a tourism program every year, and we support a lot of good causes. Community Arts Partnership has a number of programs. Beyond that, we have the Park Foundation, Triad Foundation.
What are they?
What's that?
Well, you can say that the Community Foundation has them all listed on their website.
I was going to say
Oh,
that, which is it too.
The Community Foundation?
There's a really nice page on the Community Foundation's website. It's pretty easy to find, that just lists the variety of locally based grant sources that are available. And sometimes they even keep it up to date with, you know, like what's current. So those, again, are, you know, Park, Triad, Legacy Foundation. The Community Foundation has a number of donor-advised funds within the Community Foundation that might be a fit. If you're doing something education-related, IPEI has small grants, and Tompkins Trust has a small community grant program. And there may be others, but you know, research all those sources and see if there's a fit for your particular project. And then, if I say CFA, who knows what some of you know the CFA? It's a big, it's an important acronym for those of us in planning, rural, or large organizations. The CFA is the state's consolidated funding application. New York State has dozens and dozens and dozens of agencies and programs, and 2 or 3 years ago, they moved to a system which takes all those different sources and brings them under one consolidated application form and application process. It's called the Consolidated Funding Application. You have a larger project through which you can speak to anything related to economic development. You really should be looking at it to see if there's a fit. I'll just speak a little more about it, because it's important you know that each of the 10 regions in New York State has their own strategic plan that they develop. The group that develops the plan is the Regional Economic Development Council, REDC. So the part of that's moving to a CFA process for the state is that their REDC scores the applications based on all the applications from that region. We're an 8-county region?
We are, yeah.
So there's actually 8 regions in New York State.
There are 10 regions in New York State.
10 regions in New York State,
There are
8 counties.
Yeah, in our region.
In our region. They score all the applications from that region based on how well you meet the objectives in that region's strategic plan on a 5, 10, 15, or 20. If it's 20, it's like a priority project for the region. 15 is strong, maybe, etc. So take a look at all that. We're the Southern Tier region here in Tompkins County, and the Southern Tier Regional Economic Development Council has their strategic plan listed, and you can link from there to the CFA, which lists all of the different sources that are available, and you should look into that as a resource. So that's a little about resources. Oh, something you said about your process made me think, you know, yes, we're always tweaking the guidelines, and yes, I feel really bad that we made it really hard for you. You don't want it to be hard.
Oh.
So part of what give me feedback after the application process, the 3 application is in. Let us know how the process worked for you. That's always nice to hear, and we do make changes and tweaks based on feedback from applicants. So
It was much
two-way
easier to
conversation.
hear too.
What's that?
It was much easier for me once I'd already done it,
Yeah.
so,
No, it's not that bad.
yeah.
You just-
So questions from you guys? Yes.
So if, by comment, I turn in an application to either one of you, and you don't see it quite fitting into what you have, will you maybe say, look, I can't help you, but there's an organization over here that can?
Yeah, if I'm aware of it.
Okay, all right.
There are
Do you
some.
want to talk about, you want to do that now?
What's that?
You want to ask the question now? Maybe we don't, yeah.
No, I was just wondering if someone brings in, like I know the community foundation, you can turn in an application and maybe they won't take it, but there's people on the funding, that do the funding that they'll want to pull that out and help separately on that. So it's just nice to know how to navigate through a process, whether I can turn it in and hope that I get through that. But if not, will you then help me find a place that will fund it? Not help me, but maybe give, well, here's an organization, that's all.
Yeah, if we're aware of it, yeah, I mean, we actually, there's a question in our application about other sources of funding and an evaluation criteria. We were asking you to demonstrate community support for your project, and one of the ways that we measure that is, you know, are there other funders, you know, or is this just are they just coming to us? And you know, knowing who the other funders are in advance, knowing whether it's a fit will help you with your application with us, whether or not you've actually got the money in hand right now or not. But we may not necessarily be aware of all the resources,
Yeah.
but in generally speaking, like we want you to be successful, and so we'll suggest ways that you can enhance revenues in lots of different ways, potentially.
And when we can't fund something, I'll often make suggestions, but they're not necessarily another grant. It's say, you know, why don't you pass the hat, or, you know, the grants we give are fairly small, so why don't you, you know, do a suggested donation at the door, or maybe you could sell some ads for your program. So that's the kind of advice that I'm giving. You know, once there was a local foundation, and I emailed them with 5 different projects that we had going and asked them which one fit their guidelines the best. And they told me, and so that's what I applied for, and we didn't get funded. But I didn't know which one would fit best, so I asked.
More and more, I mean, in some communities, it's a very, I think, consolidated process, and there really is this kind of close cohesion between all the different funders in the metropolitan area. That was not the case, traditionally that had not been the case in Tompkins County. I think you're seeing more and more of an effort to pull that together. I know the Community Foundation is sort of a key leader in that, but I think it's safe to assume that as the years go on, you're going to be seeing more and more of that happening. So, for example, I think it's really important if you're applying to multiple entities for a project, assume that they'll be talking to one another. So if you apply to the Legacy Foundation for a grant, you have to assume that the Tompkins Charitable Gift Fund will also know about it.
Yeah, it does
or
happen.
that, So
Or we'll even have conversations like, you know, you funded them last year, how did it work out? You know?
yeah, so I think that more and more that's taking place, and that's a good thing, because I think it helps people make better decisions, but also helps coordinate resources better. But it also puts the onus then as on us, the people who are writing these things, to be really smart up front about understanding how to make those connections early, and also have some thought about, again, how these funds are going to be used collectively. Because if you're saying, well, I'm asking for funds from the tourism fund, I'm asking for funds from CAP, and I'm not really telling you, I mean, if I get one, I'll do it. If I get them both, I don't know what I'll do. I mean, that's probably not a good position to be in. You want to be able to say, all right, here's how these things flow together, here's how these work, and here's how this might make some sense. Because people are talking to each other, and they will get us. And so oftentimes among the people who review them, there's just cross-fertilization. So there'll be somebody from tourism who's working on your panels and vice versa. And people know.
Yeah, and you can tell a budget that's got fluff in it, but I mean, just, you know, like, some people try and game the process by applying for more money than they actually need, thinking that, you know, they're more likely to get reduced funding than full funding. And we have that conversation as a review committee about what kind of budget we're looking at. And part of that is, if you are going after other funding, you know, making sure that you can articulate what pieces of their funding, pieces of your funding, and that, you know, it's all you know, well thought out and well articulated. Who's funding what?
Okay. Other questions? Yes?
What is the cycle of your funding, or is it yearly or twice a year?
For our tourism grants, it's yearly, and we hope that we can do a fall round, but we don't guarantee a fall round. This year, we used all of our tourism project grant and tourism marketing advertising grant funding in the first round, which we just are in the process of. But we are going to have a fall round for new tourism initiatives and community celebrations.
How about you, Ron? For this good?
Our grants are, their calendar year, the ones from New York State Council on the Arts. So for 2016, the deadlines will be in October and November. And the private foundation SOS grant is due on April 1st and October 1st.
What is the private foundation SOS?
Oh, well, it's called the Specific Opportunity Stipend. And it exists for artists who have an opportunity that they need to take advantage of. It could be outside the county, for example. They need travel funds, they need framing costs, they need technical assistance. The opportunity could be anywhere in the world. We funded people who were invited to be part of a playwriting festival in California, in France. So those costs, it's the overriding theme is helping artists with their career, with their art career. But we will also fund, we would help with finishing funds. You know, if a project is underway and you need money to finish it. But it all goes down to the career and the career goals of the artist.
You guys have talked about the things you should do for a good grant. You can think of the one or two things you say, if there's one thing my committee with you, don't do this. When you're writing a grant, don't do this.
Don't improvise. My grants are still paper. People will give me cardstock, which is very annoying when you have to make a lot of copies of it. Or people will use some bizarre, fancy font. It's very annoying.
Comic Sans MS.
Yeah. Well, one person, you know, our grants are they're not yet being submitted online, so it's a paper copy. And they gave me about 20 links, and there weren't actual links. It was just XYMC equals slash, and I'm like, what? I didn't ask for that. There are people who say, I know she asked for a 2-page resume, but I'm going to give her my 25-page resume. Well, guess how we all feel about that? It's annoying. So if it asks for certain attachments, give those attachments. Because when push comes to shove, and it always does, because there's way more applicants that are worthy than there usually is money to go around, the panel has to make some very excruciating decisions. And they can sit there and talk and negotiate and say, oh, we want to fund everybody, and then someone will say, hey, they forgot to give you their resume. It's like, oh, thank God, that helps us with our decision. So these don't improvise. No scented paper, no.
Just one thing coming to mind in particular, I don't particularly like it when, even if it's a good application, if I don't know it's coming. Like, I mean, I think part of my job is thinking about, okay, we've got this amount of money and these potential grantees, and how's it going to all fit together, like who's applying, who do I need to reach out to make sure, you know, communicate with me in advance. When an application from a project that I have never heard of, or you know, they just contacted me the day before, pops into the pool, saying, oh, crap, you know, they probably, yeah. We don't like that.
I don't mind that.
I don't like it,
Yeah.
because it's, usually this from an applicant that hasn't, you know, really thought about the alignment with our grant. And I can't keep them out,
Yeah,
you know. And in a way, I'm representing these applications to our grant review panel. I mean, they have to stand on their own merits, and I don't advocate for any application process.
yeah,
But
we
but,
can't.
I mean, I feel a sense of ownership over the program, and I want our applications to be strong.
Yeah.
And, you know, when one pops in there without ever having talked to me, you know, it's a mixed bag, so how good it would be.
I have another tip I just thought of. I had this really basic notes, and I haven't said things to you like, check your spelling. I figure that kind of stuff is obvious. But it's always nice to have the narrative and the budget match. For example, if you put something in the budget, you want to mention it in the narrative. And if you put something in the narrative, you want to see it in the budget. For example, you might be reading a budget and you'll see, wait, space rental? What, they didn't mention that in the narrative. What are they doing? Or rehearsal space. Oh, they didn't mention that in the narrative. So when you read the budget, you want to know what you're looking at because there was text about it. You agree with that? Yeah.
Good point. We're just about getting to the end of it. One thought, just to pick up, I think, on what Tom was saying, I think Robin as well, the notion of when you think, I've gone through grant workshops before, and I know I've written grants locally and nationally and all that sort of thing, and it seems to me that the biggest thing that one has to do to be successful in grant writing at any level, and particularly as you go up the ladder, is to create relationships. So, to your point, is absolutely right on target. It's a little bit easier at the local level, because it's local. I mean, there's just not that many spaces between people. But when you're trying to go at something at a higher level, a state or a federal level, you still need that relationship. And I think the key, it's obviously it's important what you write, but I think it's even more important than even what you write is the relationship you've established with that entity ahead of time, in terms of setting some groundwork, becoming known, having your organization or agency have a face behind the name, because without that, you're just a number, and you're not going to be terribly successful. So, I mean, certainly that's something I've seen, and that's a hard thing. That's a hard thing to do, in the sense that it takes time and it takes commitment and it takes some thinking. So, you know, if you're going to throw a grant into the Ford Foundation, I mean, you know, you would be stupid to do it in the last week. You know, you need a year's worth of, you need several, you know, you need cultivation there. You need to get to know the people, you got to get to introduce yourself, you got to spend some time with them, then you're ripe for putting in an application. So, I mean, I think particularly as you go up the ladder, building relationships, and folks that's their job. I mean, that's what you do.
Yeah.
You're okay with that. That's not a bad thing to do.
Well, I mean, right here today is part of that, in terms of, you know, we don't want to just be the funder, but we want to, our program provides support to the Downtown Ithaca Alliance to do this workshop series so that our events in our community can be successful by having a sense of what the best practices are around event management. So we are trying to build that relationship.
And something Tom said earlier, we can't advocate. So we may have talked to you for months, but when we get to that panel meeting, I can correct the decision-making panel if they're on the wrong track or if they have the wrong impression, but I can't advocate. I can't say, I really want you to fund them. So when we give advice, it's based on our experience. Has the panel made decisions that I was extremely surprised about? Absolutely. There have been applications that I secretly thought should not get funded that got funded, and vice versa. The relationship, the higher up you go on the ladder, the more you need to establish a relationship. With New York State Council on the Arts, you can't just put in an application, they need to know you. For my little tiny SOS grant, I just need a good application from you. But Tom and I are a resource, and you have to take advantage of that resource. I'm a resource.
Well, thank you, guys. Thanks very much for giving some time this afternoon for it, and let's take a couple minutes as we set up for the next panel.
What is the next one?
Volunteers. Okay, good.